We are going deep, and join me once again, Brandon Angelo. I'm Matt Waldman. You can find both of us on X. You can find Brandon, of course, at Angelo FF. Find me, as you see on the screen there. We've got a jam-packed show tonight. We're going to go deep on Tyjae Spears, who we wanted to talk about a couple weeks ago, but I think the cat's out of the bag. Trey Lance, what went wrong, maybe how to fix it, some under-the-radar movers, what we're maybe watching for college football, and then we're going to comb some waiver wire, or excuse me, comb some practice squads, and talk about notable moves that we saw that might be worthwhile for your fantasy team down the line, especially in dynasty.
100%.
Yeah, so let's get this started with the headliner. I mean, you brought it up a couple weeks ago, and we have both been fans. So, what do you think of Tyjae Spears now? What are you thinking about his timelines? Has it been accelerated at this point?
Yeah, I think so. I think, when you and I talked about him, God, going back to draft season, was where is he going to fit? And I right now, if you think of it, he has a very clear path for being a potential 2024 RB1 of the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
I don't think Derrick Henry's going to be back. I think this is going to be the year where Mike Vrabel looks and says, this brand of football is not going to win the AFC anymore, right? Too much firepower in the division. The Chiefs, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Jets now. I mean, you're not gonna beat teams playing ball control offense, running Derrick Henry 25 times a game when he's 30 years old.
Yeah.
So I think Tyjae Spears fits what the NFL is becoming at the position, and with teams playing so much more too high, I think he's if the Titans end up going in the direction I think they're going to go, I think Spears is going to be a tremendous value going forward. And he's a pretty damn good player. And we talk about his movement skill and what he does in the open field and in space with no ACLs. Pretty remarkable. I mean, he's a guy who's a top shelf mover in this class at the position. Didn't get treated as such because obviously the injuries, went to a smaller school in Tulane. But he's a guy that I think can really take a step up into being a potential upper echelon type back as a runner receiver.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited to watch him grow into a role where I think he can get significant touches in that offense this year as a hopefully spread the ball, because they don't have a ton of playmakers. But I think he's one of them, and he should be getting the ball hopefully early and often.
Yeah. Now, did we talk about Copers last time when we were talking about him? Yeah. And I mean, the quick thing I'll say is 600 gut check columns ago, when I had 0 of them, and I was listening to Gil Brandt, may he rest in peace. I was listening to Gil Brandt on air talk about it. There's this running back from Villanova, had torn 2 ACLs. One wasn't even in the game. One was slipping on black ice, and one was in a basketball game. He's had his Florida State scholarship rescinded, and he was tearing it up at the Senior Bowl, basically with 2 torn ACLs during his college football career. And if he was 10 pounds heavier, 2 inches taller, he'd be a top 5 overall pick. And that got me inspired to be in this industry. That was Brian Westbrook. And when you think of Brian Westbrook, or you think of the Copers like John Elway and Hines Ward, and you think of guys who didn't have ACLs and played well, if Tyjae Spears moves the way that he does, I mean, when you transition downhill with no extra steps from the way he does, I mean, the guy moves a lot like, to me, he moves a lot like Jamal Charles. There's a lot of Jamal Charles to this guy's game. He understands how to initiate contact and move off of it. You could say LaShawn McCoy is another guy. Those two guys are kind of like...
Yeah, Shady's an interesting one. I actually thought that when I was writing some notes today on Spears. It's because they don't lose anything from lateral to linear. And that's the one thing that made Shady McCoy nearly unstoppable in the open field. When we talk about the different archetypes of running backs and guys that play really well, there's your space creators, there's your anticipators, and those really good blends of runner receivers.
Yeah.
There was no one better at creating space for themselves than LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, and I love how you term the phrase. Lateral to linear. I have to steal that. That is such a wonderful phrase because I'm sitting here in this really bulky, watching it going, transitioning from perimeter to downhill. How many steps? But now if I could just say lateral to linear and 0 steps, lateral and linear to 1 step.
The transitions are just seamless, and that's what really separates at the running back position your middle tier guys to your elite guys, and that's what makes the difference between a 12-yard gain and a 65-yard touchdown.
Yeah, and it makes you so effective on the outside.
Yeah,
because you can't.
100%.
If you have to take 2 or more steps in the NFL game to get downhill, a defensive tackle has probably caught you. Or the backside defensive
especially
end.
now.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, safety shooting a gap, whatever. If you do it in 0 steps, man, forget it. And then the receiving game that he, in small. He's a great example of a guy who didn't catch the ball much at Tulane, but when he did, it was high leverage situations.
Yep, and that's what for me when I go back and look at the different types of running backs, like I said, really good runner receivers, the really good ones catch the ball when it matters. We're not talking about just in the flat on your, on your on your 4th read. Okay, we're jumping the ball down, on a 1st and 10 in the first quarter. No, we're talking about I remember there was a play in the Texas Bama game when it was, crunch time, 4th quarter, penultimate drive, and Jahmyr Gibbs running an angle route.
Yeah,
or running an arrow route. Or
Tulane, they went in overtime on 4th down in the red zone against Houston, and they put Spears outside and ran a back shoulder fade against man coverage, and he makes the catch perfectly like a receiver would. Wins the game.
And that's the I mean, I think statistics do speak to it in certain extents, but that's the stuff. The high leverage situation, the trust that they have in X player, that's super important. And if you look back at Tennessee and what they like to do is they do like to spell Derrick Henry out there now. They would love to do that consistently. They've done it the past couple years with some success, but we talk about a guy who can actually spell him on all 3 downs.
Yes,
and that's a different beast, and especially now a big injury that happened that no one's talking about. Kyle Phillips.
Yes.
He was going to start in the slot for them.
Yeah.
Are we going to see some Tyjae Spears potential slot snaps with both of them in the game at the same time to really cause a different wrinkle that we didn't see before in that offense? So that's going to be interesting to see.
That's a great point because Kevin Clark at The Ringer did a really nice piece on Mike Vrabel in the profile, and something, it was more of a, his career and what he's like as a coach. But one of the, wasn't necessarily a throwaway, but one of the minor points about him that has made him a successful coach is that he's scheme agnostic. And so he's more about how do I put players in situations to make plays. And I think, I appreciate your points about look, we got Derrick Henry there running it 25 times a game, and that's not going to fly probably in the future. But at the same, because he's getting older and they know this is their last shot with, and you brought this up last time. With Tannehill, with DeAndre Hopkins, they're going, we're going to get the band back together one last time, and we're going to see if we can get this to work. But I think they'll implement stuff with Spears if he shows that he can handle it on the big stage, and I think he will. I don't think this is a guy that's but that thing is going to be nice because you said he can do it all 4 downs. And that means that Derrick Henry, they save him they save him for the playoffs if they can contend. And now you're taking 7 to 10 carries off or touches off of his plate, maybe 12 to 15 snaps off of his plate, know?
I mean, you do that, extrapolate that over 17 games.
Yeah.
even 10 games, if you take 7 carries off of Derrick Henry's plate
Yeah.
in 10 games, that is 70 carries.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a lot for a 30-year-old running back.
Yes.
And the one thing I think they don't want to do is, in the stretch run, they don't want to worn down Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And it works both ways. If you're Mike Vrabel, you get a more experienced Tyjae Spears by giving him more playing time.
Yeah.
And you get a well-rested Derrick Henry. So that's a perfect marriage for a potential playoff run. So I think really that's going to hopefully be the plan, is really start to integrate Spears from day one and utilize him in areas where he's going to get in space, do well, get his confidence going, and then really start to give him some touches.
Okay, so for folks who are listening to this and going, yeah, I really appreciate this conversation, but all right, let's talk a little fantasy with this. Like, how are we gonna put this in practical terms for fantasy, both redraft
Sure.
and dynasty? Like, what's your thought in redraft? His ADP, I think, right now is probably, or it used to be around like round 14, round 15.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's that low anymore. Do you? I mean, if you're drafted in September?
Yeah, I did a draft last night, and I was in the 15th, and he still hasn't gone. I picked him up.
Wow. That's good.
But I think, I drafted Derrick Henry, so I'm like, I definitely have to do this. Even if I didn't, I'm like, I definitely have to do this. Yeah. So I think really there's going to be a few backs this year, and he's one of them. If the starter gets injured, the backup is an RB1.
Yes.
And the big ones this year are going to be Tyjae Spears, Hank Bigsby, and Jalen Warren. Those 3 guys are league winners at their ADP. If Najee Harris gets injured, Travis Etienne gets injured, or Derrick Henry gets injured. And they're all going kind of around the same range in that round 14 plus. In round 12, grab them.
Yeah.
It's well worth the risk. There's no risk in round 12. But yeah, I think really from a fantasy perspective, in redraft, I'd say around round 12, whichever one of those 3 guys you like the most. I think Spears has the most pass catching upside out of the 3, potentially because we've seen the roles that Vrabel likes the spell guy for Henry to play, and that is usually a tertiary option in the receiving game. But you can't go wrong with either of the 3. But yeah, I would say around there, you definitely have to roll the dart.
Yeah, and I would add from a redraft perspective, I love the advice for round 12, because then it helps you really plan out a very clear game plan for how you're going to build your team. Because in round 12, essentially, a lot of people either play a late round quarterback and they're getting their second quarterback or their first quarterback around that time, or they're getting that, or maybe they're getting their second tight end as a possibility, or doing that late round tight end thing and they get their first guy. So really, if you look at Tyjae Spears, and the argument of getting someone like him is saying, I get a potential league winner and probably a contributor this year who can be a flex play for me, maybe, and in a 3 or 4 start 3 or 4 running back, he might give you that. And if that's the case, then you say, all right, well then that means maybe I go early on tight end this year. And then as soon as I get my quarterbacks somewhere between rounds 9 to 11, and then I take Spears, and then I'm in good shape. Or you say, nah, man, forget it. I want to go a little bit bigger, go home. I'm going to get Mahomes because, Waldman over here is probably saying, get Mahomes because he was only 50 yards from a record season for the NFL last year, and his receivers weren't as good as what he has this year in terms of across the board. He might spread it around more. We might even get, a distance between Mahomes and everybody else this year. And if that happens, then you were good to pick him early, and then you can worry about your other quarterback. You want to pick up Jordan Love. You want to pick up Derek Carr, whoever is available in rounds, 13, 14, and 15.
For sure.
One game, and if not, maybe you hit it big on somebody. Go for it. That's.
Yeah. No, I'm a big. I like to take like a tight end early. So I take my Travis Kelce, my Mark Andrews, or I just wait.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks, there's 5 or 6 that are worth it. And I think the two that are falling I've seen a lot, and in drafts that I've done, it's been the same way. Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in 4 point per passing touchdown.
Yeah.
These are guys that are going to rush for over 5 yards, probably,
Yeah.
right? And score 8+ rushing touchdowns. Go ahead and grab them, especially with the Monken offense.
Yeah.
With Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
And Lamar actually has a plethora of weapons.
Yeah.
Like Flowers, Beckham Jr., a healthy Bateman, hopefully, Andrews, Dobbins.
Yeah. Everybody can run. Everybody can run after the catch who's like at the top of near the top of that depth chart. Even Tylan Wallace can run.
Oh, I
maybe
love
not,
me some Tylan Wallace, man.
Like
talk about ACLs. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. See, I was the same way. I love Tylan Wallace.
Oh my god, I had him so. I was so high in Tylan. He was incredible.
Yeah, me too. So, dynasty. At this point, I know that the offensive line is rated among the worst in the league in terms of the people who study that kind of thing, or at least look at the data, and it hasn't hurt Derrick Henry,
Right.
but they will probably need to revamp that line. We've basically got Malik Willis and Will Levis battling, for I don't know what. If you ask me, I was not high on either of those guys, but they were. Maybe they'll continue to improve. And Willis obviously showed some improvement in the offseason. Yeah. The fact that Willis is like, I think he's the number 2 right now. I mean,
I think so too. I really like what he did in the offseason. I think his last preseason game really showed me, okay, he actually took the coaching and he's gotten a whole hell of a lot better. And he's made the wow throws pretty consistently, which has been cool. But right now he's a number 2 quarterback in the NFL.
But that's
totally fine.
That's okay. The fact that he's made progress is a big deal. I had Willis as a draftable quarterback. I did not have Levis as a draftable quarterback.
I was the same way, and I was the same way. And the reason I had Willis a lot higher than I had Levis is Willis can bail you out.
Yeah.
Like, if he has a competent offensive line, which the Titans weren't last year, and we can get into Todd Downing's shortcomings and how awful he was as a play caller, the fact that Nick Ikini Westbrook was their best receiver for a long stretch of the season. I mean, Ikini Westbrook, Chris Conley, and Jacob Hollister.
Yeah. You're talking about journeymen who are on the bubbles of rosters. God. I mean, they may be stars in other leagues, but yeah, they're future coaches maybe.
Not great, but
yeah.
I mean, Willis can bail you out with his legs, and also, he has the improvisational capabilities that you can't really teach. Levis was so streaky. When he got hot,
Yeah. But
there were some throws on his tape where you're like, I don't know how you unteach that.
Yeah, I'm sorry if your back foot's in one direction and your front foot's in the other, and you're trying to click your whole body in place to be aligned to the target. That's not a good deal. And then you add on other things with decision making and being a beat or too late. Will Levis was just a weird eval because too. And one thing I like to do with quarterbacks, I always listen to the interviews because quarterback is such an emotional position in terms of controlling the temperature of the room around you. Yeah,
so important, right? A guy like Willis can do that, right? And people gravitate towards the kid because he's an infectious personality. He seems like an awesome young man. Levis seemed just a little bit like strange when I listened to his interviews. Like I just didn't know what to think of him in terms of being a leader, right? And that's the number one attribute for really good quarterbacks is leadership. Yeah. It's a huge intangible. And that was the thing too. I remember it was Peyton Manning and Tom Brady went on to interview some of these guys, and they did like a whole panel, and they asked questions, and some of them asked, like Bryce Young was asking questions about like different reads and things like that and what they thought in different concept, blah, blah, blah. CJ Stroud, kind of the same thing. Richardson asked a really awesome question about leadership, and you get to Levis and he asked about how do I market and brand myself. I'm like, okay, where
Cart before the horse, my man.
Yeah,
Cart before
so
the
it's
horse.
like
Yeah.
if you before the marketing and branding, you got to win the starting quarterback job.
Yeah.
Right? No one markets and brands a backup.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this an interesting eval for me, and also is an interesting spot because off-structure quarterbacks don't do well in Tennessee now.
Yeah.
So
what? So when you look at that landscape, Hopkins will probably be gone. Burks will be in place. Okonkwo will be in place. Those are two nice pieces potentially there, along with Spears. But whether they get a free agent quarterback or whether they're probably going to develop one of these guys or try to develop one of these guys or draft next year. And now you have a three-headed young quarterback situation, which will be unusual, and some people will pan it. Some people will go, hey, if you keep going to the well, maybe you'll find an automatic, but then it's still at the expense of like the development of the other guys. So where does Spears fit into this? Like, do you look at him and go, ugh, he's so talented, but that feels like a mess. Do I really want to go after him that hard to the hole in Dynasty? Or you go, look, that'll sort itself out. He's a talent.
I'm more of the fence of, and you can elaborate on this too, he's that sort of a talent where he can, because he's a good blend of runner receiver, right? And I think that's going to be important. I think if, let's say, Malik Willis does start, which could very well happen, I think their brass is a little bit probably higher on him than they are on Levis at this point in their respective careers, even though Levis's first training camp and everything. If Willis starts, look at what he did in the preseason and did well. He checked down a lot more. Yeah. And that was a really big part of his game this preseason, was he got to his check down and he, was able to not turn the ball over as much. Still a huge issue for him, but I think moving forward, this is going to be a potential soft rebuild of a team.
Yeah.
Where you're going to give Malik Willis or Will Levis 1 year to prove it. If they don't prove it, what happens is you win 4 games and you're a top 5 pick. That's fine. Take a quarterback with your top 5 pick, solve your problem, right?
Yeah.
Best case scenario, you win a couple more games than you think, and then you have a quarterback conundrum on your hands of, Malik Willis or Will Levis might be a quarterback of the future for the Titans. You sign him to a short contract, and then there you go.
Yeah.
So either way, I think Spears is the least of their worries, which is good.
Yeah.
So I think you have a guy that's going to be a productive NFL player on an offense that utilizes the running back very heavily. So I think either way, it's a win. In Dynasty, he's definitely a buy, especially if he doesn't get the touches that we think he's going to get early in the season. Because I think long-term, Derrick Henry going to a Titans non-contender probably won't happen.
Yeah. If you're looking for, I look at it this way. If you're looking for a source of protein, eggs are a good source of protein. Maybe, I'm not a nutritionist, so, maybe I'm being old school about that. But, eggs are a source of protein. And if you're going to go with eggs, you can go over easy or scrambled or boiled, At the end of the day, it may alter things a little bit, but it's still an egg, okay? And when you look at the Titans, their offensive line was bad. The quarterback play was bad last year. Derrick Henry was RB4 last year in fantasy. Still an egg. Whether it's, whether you look at Tyjae Spears and say he's a scrambled egg and you say Derrick Henry is still a fried egg, it's still an egg. And so the same thing goes. You look at Nick Chubb. He had Baker Mayfield for multiple years. Still great.
Doesn't matter.
Ramondre Stevenson last year. Running back 8. And Mac Jones did not have a strong season. Bailey Zappi's on a practice squad. And we've got Matt Corral, who we might talk about later.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's going to be fascinating. Najee Harris had Kenny Pickett and a bunch of young rookies and an offensive line that wasn't playing all that good. All these guys I just mentioned are top 12 running backs last year.
Yeah.
So, Tyjae Spears, I think you look at this guy, and I think the thing we can probably conclude is if you're looking at him as a future running back 1, Maybe I'm being too aggressive here, but if you want to trade a second round pick for Tyjae Spears, I'd do it.
In a heartbeat, because you hit the nail on the head where a lot of it is like, look at I always look at like the offense and then the ecosystem. How does it flow, right?
Yeah.
Is this a running back centric offense traditionally, right? Pittsburgh, yep. Cleveland, yep. Tennessee, yep. So Tyjae Spears is going to be in an RB centric offense. Yeah. That's who Mike Vrabel is. That's how he likes to play ball. No matter what, Tyjae Spears is going to get touches in both the receiving game and as a rusher. So, absolutely. I'm a second round rookie pick isn't the safest thing in the world, especially once you get past, pick 14, 15. Go ahead, take your shot because, you can get at the least, you're going to get, I think next year, you're going to get an RB2 or better if he's a starter for 100%.
So let's go the other end of the spectrum here, and we're going to add Matt Corral to this because I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. So, yeah. So we got Trey Lance. 49ers, they got out from under him, traded with Dallas. Dallas seems excited about the idea. What do you think I've had conversations with some people. I have some theories I'll share, and people will hear it again, but I'd rather you go first because people have heard my theories probably if they're subscribing to the RSPcast. And that way, too, we can use it as a humorous side note, too, of, whether you don the tinfoil hat with me or not on that. But tell me what you think went wrong and how you think this needs to be addressed for Lance to have a shot.
For sure. I think the biggest thing that went wrong is they realized quarterbacks that aren't in the Shanahan mold are never going to fit the Shanahan.
Thank you.
It is such an intricate system in terms of how offense is played with that West Coast system. And it's a timing based system. It is not an off structure based system, right? It's not a freelance based system where if you are off structure, timing's off, then the whole play's dead. That's how it works. So if you look at what a guy like, let's say, put Bailey Zappi in that offense, he is going to be much better than Trey Lance.
Mac
Jones, much better than Trey Lance. Because Trey Lance is too inexperienced at this point in his career to understand the timing of his drop back, the timing of his read, and how all of that kind of fits together into the puzzle, which is the Shanahan system. And now it's one of those things where you basically try to hit the home run when all you need is a single.
Yeah. And
that's what they tried to do is they found this super uber talented quarterback who is inexperienced, but we think we can get him there. But this guy who had one full collegiate season.
Yeah.
And then you're putting him in probably one of the most, I would say the most complicated offensive system for a quarterback to learn, let alone someone with less than 17 games of experience playing the position at a high enough level. I mean, recipe for disaster. And the issue is, you go into the season. I was talking with a buddy about this today. You go into the season, and what you do is you're like, Jimmy Garoppolo, you are our starter. Trey Lance, you are backing him up. I think that is an awful idea. I think you have to look at Shane Steichen, what he's doing with Anthony Richardson right now, and he's kind of calling the shots in the offense. And he's like, Anthony Richardson, you are our starter. You are our captain. We go as you go. We're with you for this roller coaster. Great. They didn't have the luxury of the 49ers to do that because they're a championship team.
Yep.
Right?
Great
they're
offensive line, strong defense, all of it.
Yep. 100%. And so you take this guy who is a potential physical transcendent type talent. I mean, Trey Lance is incredible. But what you don't take into account is how do you manage his emotions, right? Yeah. You take a guy and say, you're QB2. I would rather you just say, you know what, Trey Lance, you're going to be inactive on game days. You're going to learn what we do for the next 3 years. Let Jimmy ride this thing out, and then you're going to be inserted, and we are going to give you the keys to the city.
Yeah.
But no, you put him at QB2. Jimmy gets hurt. You insert him. He looks not great. Then he gets hurt the next year. and then you say there's a quarterback controversy, and then what do?
Yeah.
Okay, Brock Purdy outplays him.
Yeah.
That's not good. And then Sam Darnold outplays him.
Yeah.
And then it's over.
Yeah. Here's my take, and I'm glad what you brought up because we can piece it together. Because my initial take was it sounds a little tinfoil hattish, but I don't think it is once you really piece it together. Because, and I'm sorry, folks, if you listen to the RSP cast enough, because I've told this story probably for the third or fifth time. We'll see. But I think it's important for those of you maybe who've tuned in, who tune in sporadically at different points. Kyle Shanahan's dad, who he grew up learning from as a coach, Mike Shanahan, was a wonderful offensive mind and a terrific coach in X's and O's and play calling. Great play caller. Great play caller. He's also had a very dysfunctional way of dealing with coworkers. And I say that because I've heard that in other situations, like Jake Plummer when he helped lead the Broncos to the AFC Championship against the Patriots, and the next year they drafted Jay Cutler, and that next year, according to people I know like Cecil Lammey who charted plays, they took out Jake Plummer's best play, which was basically a sprint off play action to the right, throwing the deep post, which scored them multiple touchdowns the year before. Mike Shanahan took that completely out of the offense. They did not run that with Jake Plummer the next year. Jake Plummer had the locker room the year before. The locker room loved him. The next year, he didn't play all that well, but some of his best plays were taken out of the playbook, and he was summarily benched at that point for underperformance. Jake Plummer retired after that season in disgust, and Jay Cutler was put in. Okay, now you might say, oh well, that's just one instance, but then let's fast forward to Washington. And Robert Griffin.
Oh yeah. Here we go.
Robert Griffin gets drafted. First round pick, and then they pick Kirk Cousins later in that draft. Not that far after fourth round, fourth round, something like that.
Fourth round.
Fourth round. Okay.
Out of Michigan State.
So you got Daniel Snyder probably heading the point on getting Robert Griffin, the splash play, the top, one of the top players. And then you've got the demand to get that second quarterback with starter quality. Now, in theory, in theory, I love the idea of getting multiple quarterbacks and trying to hit on them. I understand that if you're going to manage it in a functional sort of way. But then we come to find out, 2 years after, Griffin gets hurt in that playoff game as a rookie, the next year, I'm watching him. And I'm watching lots of Max protect with an offensive line that really couldn't protect him anyway. And then they only had 2 or 3 receivers out on routes. And Griffin, nobody was getting open. And Griffin's just getting pummeled and pummeled and pummeled. And I literally wrote an article called The Degradation of a Young Stud. I mean, it's kind of a provocative title. But that was what was going on. Well, Shanahan gets fired. Shanahan's in the press years later and tells this story. And the story he tells is, Robert Griffin came to me after the first season. And, I know Daniel Snyder put him up to this because, Robert's a good guy. He didn't know. He was just a young guy. He wouldn't know how to handle this. But he came to me, and can you believe that he said that he wanted to be developed as a pocket quarterback and, and he felt like he had a chance to be able to develop that way. And could you help him do that? Can I help him do that? And he'd also like input into the offense, like input on some plays with play design and play calling. And I mean, come on, Robert didn't know, but I mean, who asks, what young player, first year, second year player asks their coach to have input in the offense? So I listen to that and I'm going, that doesn't smell right to me. So I ask a scout and a consultant with like 30 teams at the time, or not 30 at the overall, but he's worked with 30 different teams over a long career. He's no longer in the league, but like he's been a scout for 4 different teams. And I go, So what percentage of players, after their first year, want input into the offense at that time? And he goes, 80 to 90% of the quarterbacks get that. He goes, why? And I explained the story, and he goes, oh yeah, no, 80 to 90%. And so you look at that and you go, oh, look at Mike. Mike trying to make Robert look like he's just this young, naive guy to support his point to go after Daniel Snyder. So I bring all that up because Kyle Shanahan was on staff. Kyle Shanahan learned some things from his dad. Kyle Shanahan always has his guys. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, okay? It's, you said it very well. It's a very complex offense. And Trey Lance played in a West Coast offense at North Dakota State, but when you play at North Dakota State and things go off structure and you're a superior athlete, the timing thing isn't as important as when it happens when you're facing the Minnesota Vikings in, Sunday night game. So and the complexity of defensive reads and coverage reads and all that are far higher and harder to suss out at the NFL level than it is at North Dakota State. So the promise may be there, but Trey Lance may have had so much success with the timing of drops, which you would often see at North Dakota State, but he didn't have to face the level of pressure or confusion. So he may not have really ingrained the value of that timing that you mentioned. And so when you fast forward to him getting drafted, you could see how they were all, there were people saying, they are all looking at Mac Jones, and then they pulled the switcheroo and picked Trey Lance. But, they didn't really want Mac Jones. They were just fooling everybody. Or was it really that John Lynch wanted Trey Lance, and Kyle Shanahan wanted Mac Jones because he needed the system guy?
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting point you brought up with Robert Griffin III. Because if you look at how poorly that was managed, and especially his injury, that was probably one of the most egregious misuse of personnel I've ever seen in my life.
And
this
to
is a kid that
prove
was
a point, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. And that was awful. I mean, Robert Griffin III was he was one of the best rookie quarterbacks ever.
Yeah.
And just ruined his career. But in this instance, I think it was a little more psychological than physical with Trey Lance, of proving Jimmy Garoppolo is better than you are. What are you going to do about it? Goes and gets hurt.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy's better than you are. What are you going to do about it? We're bringing Sam Darnold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does the same thing. And it's one of those interesting things where he was just never set up for success to begin with.
Yeah.
Because they said, we're gonna make you battle for this job, knowing full well you're not gonna get it.
Yeah.
And if you do see the field, you're not gonna be ready.
Yeah. And with Shanahan, he's a hard coach, and that's okay. Coaching hard's fine. Mike Vrabel's a hard coach.
Yeah.
But the thing is that when you watch the record of players that they pick, I honestly think in 10 years we're going to hear John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. There's going to be a story about where one of them says, we didn't see eye to eye on how we picked personnel, and we were having a cold war with it because, you look at the running back position. Shanahan from Atlanta days, Tevin Coleman, who was a good gap, I would say he was a gap runner with great speed. He was not a good decision maker.
He was a runway back.
Exactly. Yeah. So you put him in there, and they tried to force him in early. Shanahan did. That was a Shanahan guy. And I'm for sure the team, after they saw that it wasn't working, the coach and staff's like, no, man, just put Devonta in there. Devonta can run whatever we need him to. He can't run with speed, but we don't have that quality of line. And they started giving the Coleman gap plays, even though they didn't run gap plays. And he didn't run gap plays back then. Even back then, he ran much more zone. He didn't run as many power and toss. But they did that to keep him on to keep Coleman on the field, but only situationally because he couldn't handle he had too many ups and downs. But then he takes Coleman, Jerick McKinnon, Elijah Moore, Mitchell, the guys that were his guys were late round guys or free agents that he brought over, hoping that I just want the scheme. The scheme's just going to be like, here's the hole, hit it hard. I don't want nuance. Trey Lance is more of a nuanced back. He's not a hard hole hitting guy. He's more of a Devonta Freeman type of diagnoser that they thought, well, we can train that out of him. Or maybe it was John Lynch going, that's a nuanced runner, and our scouting staff saying that's a nuanced runner. We like him, and we can work with that. And Kyle Shanahan going, I just want a speedy back who's going to go exactly where I tell him to, because as quarterback coaches have told me, the biggest complaint about the West Coast offensive coaches is that they can sometimes see their players as pixels on a screen, and they're the video game controller.
Yes.
As opposed to a Vrabel guy. And it doesn't mean that's a bad thing by Kyle Shanahan or all West Coast coaches, but you could see where all this plays into the effect of that the guys that keep getting brought in that didn't pan out maybe could have panned out, but somewhere else. But they basically got rough treatment early, and rough treatment early by a guy who was like, I'm just going to run them out of here so that I don't have to deal with trying to change my system. My system is the big thing.
100%. It goes back to the coach the player in front of you, don't coach the system.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the issue is Trey Lance is in front of them, but like, doesn't matter. We're just going to run this. We're just going to run this the system the way we think we need to run it. But you run into issues when you make a guy your QB2 when your system is designed for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah. Right.
And then let's say you insert Trey Lance into a mid-game situation, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Because he's not Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy thing is you look at what Andy Reid did with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Played that perfectly. You don't think Andy Reid knew all camp going into, rookie year Pat Mahomes, that Pat Mahomes is an unbelievable arm talent and an incredible off-structure QB. Of course he knew.
Yeah.
But he also knew he needed time to understand NFL defenses, coverage reads, leaks and tells, and all that sort of stuff. He knew. They had a competent enough quarterback in Alex Smith, a veteran, to operate the offense. They didn't need Patrick Mahomes. Sit him the whole year.
Yeah.
Great. And that's what should have been done with Trey Lance, is you basically either make the kid inactive, make him QB3, and just help him learn because he's so inexperienced, but instead you stunted his development, and now he goes to Dallas, where I think he's going to be next up from Dak Prescott, whenever that is. I think 2 years, give or take. But then you have the pressure of being the next Dallas quarterback.
Right.
Like that's tough, man. I mean,
yeah, he's gonna have to have Jalen Hurts' maturity to handle that, and Jalen Hurts' maturity is a standalone thing. That's not a he is probably one of the most resilient, I would say, human beings as an athlete that I've seen. Yeah, go
from being benched
in
the middle of the national championship game,
standing next to people on national TV with the trophy being
millions watching you.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. That's a man right there. That's a man you aspire to be from that perspective of having that humility, but that confidence, that inner confidence. Go, fine, I'm going somewhere else. And I'm gonna work my way into being that's something else. And I hope Trey Lance can do that. But that's a tall order, So, do you take the chance on Trey Lance, or do you just hold him if you have him, or are you trying to get out from under him if you have him?
I mean, it depends on what your league mates are trying to do. I mean, for me, it's like you probably invested really heavily into it, right? Probably a top 5 rookie pick,
probably,
right? If you're in your rookie drafts, if you have in startup drafts, probably a top 5 round pick, right? Yeah. So it's like you kind of hold them and see. Um, but it's so tough, man, because you're holding them for probably 2 or more years.
Yeah, yeah,
But the hit rate on, let's say you get a third round rookie pick for him, the hit rate on third round rookie picks is really low.
yeah.
So it about evens out. But I mean, I'm taking a talent like Trey Lance. Those guys can be awesome stars, and some guys are just late bloomers. Look at Geno Smith, right? I mean, it takes time for some to be a competent or above NFL quarterback.
Yeah,
So patience
Steve
is
Young needed to
required.
sit behind Montana for a long time, and he was awful in Tampa.
100%.
with the
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah,
Yeah.
the list goes on.
I have Trey Lance in a lot of leagues. I'm just holding on to him. Most of them are deep rosters,
For
so
sure.
I have the luxury. But
100%.
yeah, and it's a great point, and I think that I'll just put it this way. I honestly think that Christian McCaffrey was John Lynch going, okay, I'm putting you in a corner, Kyle. We're gonna go get this guy, and he is the runner who isn't gonna just go where you want him to go. He's gonna do whatever the fuck he wants to, and it's gonna be the right answer 99% of the time. How are you gonna use him now? Are you gonna
Yeah.
complain to me about that? Or are you gonna try and put like a late round pick guy in who, good for that guy, but he's nowhere
Yeah.
near that? Because if Kyle doesn't make Christian McCaffrey the LaDainian Tomlinson of this generation in that offense, and they lose, he's gone. He's gone. I don't care how how much of a genius he is. He's gone, and then you're going to start hearing all this stuff. If he,
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, there was an interesting Jimmy Garoppolo did an interview, and he kind of alluded to that. It was kind of like a you'll see one day type deal. But then I also heard too, like about a year ago, about Deebo Samuel. And one of the reasons they brought in McCaffrey, I think, was because they got so freaking frustrated with Deebo Samuel.
yeah,
Deebo wanted to be treated like he's the superstar of the league,
yeah,
and then got pissed when they brought in McCaffrey.
wow.
But then he's like, you know what? I want to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. He's not a very good receiver.
No, he's a great open field runner who can catch the ball, but his route running, his releases, they're not. Brandon Ayuk is going to be the top guy if you're going to look from a standpoint of who's the go-to guy. I mean, he might very well have that opportunity if he continues to build on the route skills that he has. So yeah,
Right. I mean, McCaffrey's a much more complete player, and I think the thing is, you know what you're getting from McCaffrey down the down.
yeah,
You don't know what you're getting from Deebo Samuel down the down. I think that the front office is starting to understand with the injuries to Deebo, which have been very frequent throughout his young career. It's that piece of it of you want a more consistent down the down guy that can do both and do both better than Deebo can. But this is gonna be one of those 30 for 30 type deals.
Yes.
In 15 years, we're gonna George Kittle commentating on this, and it's gonna be great.
yeah.
But it's been an interesting ride with that offense to see all the changes that have gone on, and how some of these guys are received by their teammates and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and people are complicated. I feel like I'm banging on Kyle Shanahan a ton, but at the same time, I understand how he got into this situation in terms of if you believe in your system and your system's had success and you grew up with a dad whose system has won Super Bowls and you see how this goes, you may feel like you have a bully pulpit.
Right.
But at the same time, that's where maybe growth can be helpful. So, all right. So, who are some under the radar movers now that we've thoroughly exhausted Spears, Lance? Oh, we didn't even get to Matt Corral. We can go. Let's do that one quick because Matt Corral.
Yeah, for sure.
Matt Corral goes to the Patriots. Okay, I personally love this. Not that
sure.
Not that he's ready to take on a Bill O'Brien offense at this point, though. O'Brien does a lot of RPO work, so that could be helpful. But I thought Corral had some of the best potential of the quarterbacks in last year's class, which wasn't strong in terms of the overall value.
Right.
But I feel like from what I saw, he's good off structure. He's very good off structure. and I thought his pocket skill was pretty darn good, and it just was a matter of having an offense that getting used to playing in an offense that again more timing, more
Right.
more sophistication. He didn't play. Lane Kiffin's offense wasn't heavy on the sophistication.
No, I think that's a huge deal. I like the spot, especially because you get to learn how to be a professional,
Yes.
right? Especially in a Belichick room, anywhere in that building. If you're not a professional, you're out the door, right? And I think that's why one of the guys that you love, and I can echo that too, is Kayshon Boutte,
Yes.
right?
Thank you.
You learn to be a professional, or we're cutting you,
Yeah.
and it's that simple.
Yeah.
And look what's happened, right? I think that's a huge deal when you get that type of accountability in a quarterback room, especially with a guy like Matt Corral. Is it elevates your level of play because you have to live and breathe football.
Yeah.
Right. And for Matt Corral to be a starting caliber NFL quarterback, that's what he has to do. Has to be a professional. Has to learn the ins and outs of the game and the position to be able to lead a team as their QB1. Will it happen in New England? I don't know, but this just elevates his. This is the spot that will elevate his chances, I think, the most out of anywhere in the league, because it gives you the opportunity to actually learn from one of the greatest minds of all time, and Bill Belichick, right? So I'm a huge fan of it. I liked Corral coming out. His off-structure ability is really impressive. Really good on RPOs, but a lot of the timing and everything too is too many mistakes, right? Same with like Malik Willis in that class too, and same with a lot of those guys, because their draft capital wasn't great, and that told us something. But yeah, I think it's interesting because he's going to get a chance to learn, which is important.
Yeah, if this is one of those situations. It's almost like it's sink or swim. This is the best This is the best thing. You're going to know quickly, and what I mean quickly is you're going to know when this stop. Once if he gets cut from this stop, then you can pretty much write him off, and maybe we'll be wrong, but the percentage will be very low. But he is instantly the most physically talented quarterback on that
in
roster.
The room.
Yeah.
100%. Maybe Malik Cunningham, but
yeah. Okay,
that's an interesting one too. But yeah, I mean I like Corral there. I mean, like you said, sink or swim. If he doesn't pan out, we know he's not going to pan.
Yeah. All right. So, who are some under the radar movers for you, like that you've kept your eye on this preseason?
I think the three that come to mind: Chris Evans, Cincinnati. Okay. That's a big one because I think that Samaje Perine, departure is bigger than people think, because Samaje Perine was just implemented in terms of you're really reliable. You can do maybe 80% of what Mixon can do, but you're reliable 100% of the time, which Mixon isn't. And I don't think people understand that Joe Mixon is a very good physically gifted player, but the between the ear stuff hasn't ever been there, which is okay. You can get away with it. In this offense with Joe Burrow leading the charge, he's going to get a lot of second level opportunities. Early on in his career, couldn't get away with it. Now he can, but a guy like Chris Evans takes a lot off the plate in terms of, in my opinion, the receiving capabilities. Because Chris Evans is a really natural receiver, and it seems like he's really improved as a pass protector, which I think was number one reason Perine was so valuable, is he kept Joe Burrow clean. And Evans, I think this offseason, from what I've heard, what I've read, and also what I've seen from those preseason games, has been able to do that. Second one is Tyler Scott in Chicago.
Yeah.
I like Tyler Scott, man. I think he's gonna be a really good player. One day, I think he's better than Chase Claypool.
I agree.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Chase Claypool, but I think Tyler Scott's gonna be one of those. He's gonna be one of those guys that pops as a returner. I think a kick returner. And then, this kid can play. And then one of the guys, Mooney or Claypool or someone's going to go down for a couple series, and they're going to insert Tyler Scott, and he can be, he's a kid that can take it 80 yards in one touch, right? And then the last one's the Mario Douglas.
Ah, yes.
And that's a fun one because, when I was watching Malik Willis at Liberty, he was the one guy that I'm like, who the heck is this?
Yeah.
And it happened over and over and over again. And then watch him in the preseason. Then you hear all these big reports like Douglas is wide receiver 1 right now in this offense. And like the Mario Douglas, and he kept doing it. And you see him barely play a preseason snap.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
I mean, he literally, it might be day 1 starters, Douglas, Smith-Schuster,
And Bourne, right?
and Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah.
And that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But, hey, if you impress Bill Belichick as a rookie, I mean, that's something. Who was the last rookie wide receiver to start with Bill Belichick? I don't know.
Kenbrell Tompkins, because I liked him.
Holy
and then
cow, you're right.
He kept dropping passes with Brady. And it was because he had a huge
God,
camp.
that's right.
And he was the undrafted free agent who was like related to Antonio Brown, maybe?
It wasn't. I think it was AB. Yeah. Right.
And I loved me some Kenbrell Tompkins. What's so funny is my Twitter still has a search memory of Kenbrell Tompkins whenever I pull up search. It still says Kenbrell Tompkins.
That's crazy. But yeah, it's been a minute.
It has been a while. But those are great. Those are great options. Yeah, because DeMar Douglas kind of played a Tyreek Hill type of role for Liberty. Obviously, he's not Tyreek Hill, but he's that guy that when you watch him, you can go, oh, yeah, I can see how he plays, that he could be the 3rd or 4th receiver within a year or two, For
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, how about you?
All right. So, one of them's definitely Chris Brooks. With the Jeff Wilson move to IR, Salvin Ahmed is a proven guy, was picked up as an undrafted free agent out of Washington by the 49ers and then moved over here with McDaniel to the Dolphins. And he can catch, he's got some burst. I don't think he's not a very powerful runner. He's kind of in that like a younger Myles Gaskin without Gaskin's savvy, but a little more juice, Yeah. It's so, and maybe they feel like that's cool. But Chris Brooks, it's been 2 years. For 2 years, I've been sitting here going, I love this back. I know he's not like a draftable guy, but you, at least in the way that people are going to see him, but you watch him at Cal, and he runs through people at 230. And he catches the ball on like wheel routes and bullet routes, and like I'm watching this guy then also make plays in the red zone and get targeted in the red zone and work his way open and make adjustments as a receiver. And then it's like, okay, as I'm watching him, he's a good zone runner. He can, better inside zone than outside zone, obviously, because he doesn't have great juice, but he's got burst. He's got enough burst that you look at him and go, okay, he's in that mold of like if James Conner at his best is like the aspirational player, and like Mike Anderson and Gus Edwards are like in that middle. Chris Brooks ain't that far away, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's Alfred Morris.
Yeah, hey, there you go.
Alfred Morris
with receiving chops.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one thing Alfred Morris couldn't do for the life of him, which is fine.
Yeah,
but fundamentally sound runner who brings it and has enough speed to threaten backers.
Yeah, and that's and in an offense like that you're just trying to open holes. This is a guy who gets you hard yards and he gets smart yards.
Yep.
And
he's your energy giver, and that's a super important role in offense, and that's going to be honestly throughout the league. That's going to be a really growing role.
Yeah,
because you get your guys like Jamal Williams who will forever have a spot on an NFL roster because that is his role. He's the energy giver. He gets you high leverage, short yards, low red zone. Cool.
Yeah. Jaleel McLaughlin. I've been writing about him since January. And my comp for him was another guy with passing skills and another guy who didn't have it, which was, and ironically, you're gonna laugh when I say, but the guy that came to mind to me was Philip Lindsay
Yeah,
with
I knew
receiving
it. Yeah.
skills. You know,
Oh yeah.
and it's like when you watch him, the thing that just totally blew me away was how good he was at getting skinny through creases. He had no fear manipulating tight creases and hitting the hole with the decisiveness you want, and being able to like at least take on safeties and do it in a way where he was going to get the better of them. Like he knew how to angle himself to win in collisions and not hurt himself doing
No,
so.
100%. I mean, I say it all the time with backs who are smaller in stature, using your speed into power is your best asset.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a good accelerator, good enough accelerator, that is going to have safety. It's not going to scare them. They're going to be second guessing if you do that a couple times. You come up to the third level and they're like, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
And that's a super important trait. And that's what Philip Lindsay had.
Yes.
Dude was he was a pit bull.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? And that was the best part of Philip Lindsay's game is he was 100 miles an hour 100% of the time. He was small Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah. And he was a very smart runner. Very smart decision maker.
Brilliant feet.
Yes. Yes. And Jaleel McLaughlin's got something there that the team apparently today has reported that the team has really like taken a shine to this guy. Like they really like the players are bought in. P. Ryan's a tractor, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you put P. Ryan on third downs and you just let him play. You let him do his thing, man.
Yeah.
You let him keep Russell clean and that's it. You know? Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So he's definitely one. And then I mean I could pick a few receivers here. You know, I'll give an honorable mention to Raheem Jarrett just because he went from
Tampa, yes sir.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that he was going to make a roster because he covered punts well and that he was a 5-star athlete. But he's refined his hands positions enough, at least watching his attack in the preseason, going, okay, maybe he's catching on here, and if he does, you know, could be a slot receiver for them, could be their starting slot receiver, even with Trey Palmer, you know, there. So that's one.
That's a super interesting one too because you look at what that team is going to be like in 2 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike Evans is probably going to be gone.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin's probably going to be gone. They're going to have a new quarterback. I mean, he or Trey Palmer is probably going to start. I think has a chance at starting in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, right, as a power slot, you can do way worse than Jarrett.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a fascinating one. And then I'll add Eric Ezukanma back in Miami. You know, powerful runner after the catch, good contested catch guy, good concentration, but maybe needed work with his route running. And here he is with Wes Welker as his coach. And Wes Welker probably a little partial to those Texas Tech guys, you know, a little bit. And he did recently say Eric's a freak of an athlete, and said some positive things about him and what he's working on. And there might be a chance when you look at this tight end room. I mean, listen, Tyler Kroft is a professional. He just can't stay healthy. Like, I think that he's been on multiple teams because he can block competently. He is a silky smooth receiver in zone, and he can win a little bit underneath in man, but he just can't stay healthy. Then you look at Durham Smythe, and he's like the everyman kind of. He's like the Anthony Fasano of this era. For sure. You know, he's that Notre Dame tight end who can basically make some tough plays, but he's not a matchup threat really, unless in most cases. So who else do they have after that? They don't. So maybe we use a big wide receiver who's a little physical, and instead of going consistently with tight ends in two tight end sets, we do more 11 personnel and let Ezukanma be kind of our middle of the field enforcer, give him some more two-way goes, and let him run.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting you said that because with Chosen Anderson, his departure, their third receiver is Braxton Berrios or Cedric Wilson Jr.
Yes.
So long term, there might be an audition for a guy like Azukama. And I liked him a lot coming out of Texas Tech too,
Yeah.
because he had a lot to offer you after the catch for a bigger receiver, right? And not
Yes.
just I'm gonna, be bigger, faster, stronger than a couple guys. No, I'm gonna win with some nuance in the open field and get by some guys and make really interesting plays from a movement perspective. I loved seeing that out of him in the open field at Texas Tech, and I think in terms of a yard after catch, I think he offers more to you than Wilson and Barrios from a
No doubt.
depth standpoint.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that'll be interesting too. It'll be interesting too if they want to bring Jalen Waddle back a little more slowly from whatever injury he has. If they use Azukanma on some of those underneath, those shallow crossers, so to speak, that Waddle runs really well,
Yeah.
right? Use him there and take a little bit off Waddle's play from a snap count standpoint. So that'll be interesting too.
So I'm going to just put a footnote on Chris Brooks and say this, since we're still in Miami and we're
Yeah.
going to move on. One of the things that caught my eye, just a little layer that I thought, oh, this might be a real positive, is you know who represents him? Zach Zenner.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, hang on. So Zach Zenner is a sports agent now.
I think so. He's
Get
either a
out
trader or
of
a
here.
sports agent. But he
Get out of here.
when they were at the Hula Bowl and Chris Brooks was tearing up the Hula Bowl, Zach Zenner was retweeting some of my stuff and then also like writing about how, how he was he was a client, that
That's
Chris
funny.
Brooks
I
was a
didn't know
client.
that.
And so that made me feel good, not because, it's a former running back, but
Right.
yes, it is. A former running back who went either 7th round or undrafted and made a team. So if there's a guy, that was a smart choice, if you ask me. Like maybe you don't know from a negotiation standpoint,
That's
that
funny.
was Zach. But if I were a running back who knew that, like, I'm just trying to get in the league,
Dude.
and a guy comes to me and goes, I got into the league, and I
That's
was in your
funny.
shoes, and I was I was a fast back who I did a boiler room episode or film room episode with the head of who is now Alex Brown, who is now the director of recruiting at SMU. One of my first boiler rooms was on Zach Zenner. Him and I watched him, so it was really kind of
that's
funny, full circle that we
That is
ended up
funny.
with Zenner. So
I
yeah,
don't know that anymore.
it's just that choice, and I looked at that like back in December or January, whenever it was, and I was going,
It's a good choice.
yeah, that's a smart choice. I like this guy. That Berkeley education,
It's coming in handy.
Well, there you go.
That's funny.
So, heck, we're already over an hour. Do you want to go a little bit more, or what do you think?
Sure. It's
Okay,
up to you,
let's
man.
let's look at some guys on the waiver wire, or like not on the waiver wire, on practice squads that just caught our eye. So who's somebody that you're like, we talked about Matt Corral, obviously. We talked about Myles Gaskin getting moved over and signed, and he's on the active roster.
Yeah.
And I'll just add Ty Chandler. You might want to look out, because that's a guy who's a
Yeah.
a smooth veteran who knows his stuff. But like, who else comes to mind for you?
Oh man, I have a couple of them, and I think the one a couple are interesting. I think one in Jacksonville, we have Jacob Harris,
Oh, I love him.
because
Fun.
I think he can be Evan Ingram,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because so he came out, and the Rams transitioned him to tight end from my understanding, and then he had the ACL injury, and then got cut, and then all that stuff happened. But I think he's a very much an Evan Ingram type player from a physical standpoint, right? He's strong, he's fast, not much of a blocker, but that's an interesting one to me. The Giants and Tyree Jackson's one that's interesting, because you have Darren Waller there now, so that's one that I think I have my pulse on. Who's a couple others? I think Zonovan Knight, Detroit.
Yes.
They
Thank you.
don't have a third back.
Yeah.
They literally do not have an RB3. So I think Zonovan Knight offers you the more David Montgomery than Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, if Gibbs gets hurt, that's going to be a massive blow to their plans, Ben Johnson's plans for that offense. Right?
Yeah.
You can't replicating him is much more difficult than replicating a David Montgomery type, right? But if David Montgomery gets hurt, those touches are the low red zone, high leverage short yardage touches are probably going to go to Gibbs. They're going to go to probably Zonovan Knight, which is a pretty interesting role. Then also Patrick Taylor, who lit up the preseason, by the way. If Aaron Jones isn't back next year, they might run their RB2 as Patrick Taylor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you could do. I mean, if he develops, you could do way worse. I think he's a guy in the preseason that showed he can handle a lot. But with that offense, AJ Dillon, I don't know what you're going to give AJ Dillon from a load standpoint. Are you going to be able to give him, 75% touches? Probably not. So I think that's an interesting one for me when you look at Patrick Taylor, what he did in the preseason. They clearly like him enough to, put him on their practice squad.
Yeah.
If Aaron Jones isn't there for whatever reason next year, he could be someone that sneaks into the RB2 role in Green Bay.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because the guy that I was kind of a fan of was the other running back, which was Tyler Goodson, who was waived injured, just because I knew someone who basically, or he's back on IR. So they put him on IR, it looks like, 12 hours ago. So because he can catch. He's definitely a good pass catcher. And he ran a system at Iowa where they were very strict about what they wanted him to do on wide zone. And I was told that the playbook basically was saying, we don't have a line good enough to allow him to do cutbacks. So we took it out of the playbook. And Goodson's a good cutback player. He just didn't get to do it a lot. So he didn't have as good of a preseason, I think, as Taylor did, but he still had some nice moments. So he was a guy that I was looking at. But Hassan Hall, the running back from Georgia Tech by way of Buffalo, I think, who's with Cleveland, he had some good moments. He's a good receiver, good return man. He's on the Browns practice squad. I even got Russ Landy, the former national scout for the Alouettes and former NFL scout, who's we've done shows for the past few years together. He texted me one day and he goes, "What did you have for Hassan Hall?" Wanted to know about Hassan Hall because he saw him in the preseason and was like, that dude runs hard. Like I like what I saw, And I was like, yeah, I liked Hassan Hall. He was definitely a notable player, and it was a good fit over there. So he certainly fit the bill for me. Other guys that certainly looked the part, that I was thinking about. Elisha Higgins, like I know that he's a wide receiver trying to be a tight end, but you knew that he was going to get that memo early, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Elijah Higgins would have stayed on the roster if they didn't have the issues they had at running back. And
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, because so it wasn't like he was awful in camp. It's just he has to learn how to block. And he has to get better in that regard as a full-time tight end. So when 5 teams go to try and get you, that the Miami was like, oh, God, we got to lose him. And it was probably like that whole thing. They were like, this Chris Brooks kid is like giving us headaches, or it was the whole Mike White's been hurt all preseason. We brought him in to compete with Skylar Thompson, and while Thompson didn't play as well as I hoped he would personally, they're like, we got to roll with Skylar and we're gonna have to keep White too. We got to keep this kid Brooks because he's been too good, and we might need him. Right. So, shoot, we got to get rid of Higgins. So that guy, especially when you look at the Cardinals, and you think they're what is it? His Petzing, Zach Petzing, or I don't know what his first name is, but Petzing is the offensive coordinator. He was a quarterback coach
Yes,
Cleveland.
yes.
So they're probably running a lot of elements of
Oh my
Cleveland's offense,
God.
which is multiple tight ends at times. Which
Yeah,
is
so they brought Josh Dobbs in.
they brought Josh Dobbs in.
Yeah.
This is a Cleveland Browns offense in many respects where they're going to run the ball a little bit more. And you got James Conner, and you've got Keontae Ingram, who another favorite of ours.
Yes.
Who is
Absolutely.
so maybe they go.
Oh my
We
God.
may need more than Trey McBride. Zach Ertz is going to be gone.
Yeah.
We may need another guy who we can put into this mix, and and go from there. And whether it's Tune or Dobbs or we talked about Murray already. So whether it's Caleb Williams or Drake May or Penix or whoever it is.
I mean, they are firmly the number one in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Do they win 2 games this year?
No, I don't. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
See?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, this is
if Dobbs to me is the perfect representation of when people say, when people talk about quarterbacks and they say when we scout them, it's about smarts. I go, Josh Dobbs is a rocket scientist. Literally was an aerospace engineer,
Yeah.
But Brett Favre is as far away from a rocket scientist as you want to get. But, on the football field, the intelligence that applies to playing football is different than what it is to designing rockets, And I think that Josh Dobbs is a good example of that. And he's gotten better, He has gotten better. But we're not going to mistake him for anybody as an NFL starter at this stage, So
yeah, no, 100%. He can. You can see, especially last year, with how easily he picked up the Tennessee Titans offense, which wasn't overly complicated. But yeah, I mean, you can just toss him in any system. He'll learn it. Can he execute things at a high level?
Yeah,
no, because that's not him. Like he's a middle of the road backup.
Yeah,
but
the quick thinking isn't there. The quick thinking, confidence of execution that you have to have.
100%. But I mean, if you start Josh Dobbs for 17 games, I don't know how many you win.
I'll end it in Green Bay, again, like you did. Though I love the Zonovan Knight. You've got to keep an eye on Zonovan Knight. I second that one so wholeheartedly. I'll say Grant Dubose, the Charlotte wide receiver, who got hurt early in the year and really never fully caught up. Dontavian Wicks looked pretty good, and so he's made the active roster.
Virginia. Yep.
But I think Samori Toure could be in trouble with Grant DeBose in a year. Like, that would be one that I would go, keep an eye out for that. And if either Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson end up somewhere else or somebody flames out, and I'm rooting for Romeo Doubs, and I know that a lot of people have him as a breakout player, but he's one of those players that I worry about is he's great with everything up to the catch point. And I know that he had a 60% catch rate in contested situations, according to, I think, PFF. But to me, it's the technique over the stat, the data tracking. And I understand that Terry McLaurin, like I joke, is the bumblebee of receivers. That physically it shouldn't happen by the rule of physics, but like he does it anyway. Dubs, I need to see more proof before I'm bought into that,
Yeah, and it's funny because like those guys, it's the 99th percentile.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like all that's going to succeed, right? There's guys in the past, Des Bryant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's guys that are just unnatural catchers, but it works because stylistically that's who they are, and they're at the upper percentile of playmakers, right?
Yeah. The last one I guess would be Deneric Prince. I'm not a huge Deneric Prince fan compared to other people, but like, he's got some footwork issues that I think cause some balance stuff, but he's got some burst. He can run with power. He can catch the ball. I think the idea that he's ready to take over if the shot comes is not quite that. And I think the fact that he got cut and added to the practice squad is probably an indication of that. But I think that he can be he can give you a little of the Darrell Williams type of thing without being as savvy as Darrell was. If Darrell had burst, he would have been a starter.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, look, this show so much fun, and we hope that you enjoyed the hour and 20 minutes that this is rolling up on. I'm sure we could have gone a lot further, but we've got other things we got to do. We know you got other things that you got to do. Hopefully this was a fun long drive for you, or
absolutely,
or knock out a good workout. So
absolutely.
On behalf of Angelo, you can find Angelo at Angelo FF. You can find me at Matt Waldman, and thanks again, and we'll see you probably in a couple of weeks.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right.
Take care, everyone.